The air in the opulent dining room, thick with the scent of roasted juniper and cinnamon, was absolutely perfect. The crimson velvet bow on the centerpiece, meticulously tied by hand, was the final touch on a Christmas setting designed to convey flawless domestic bliss. But when the mahogany door swung open, shattering the silence, the perfect scene curdled. It wasn't the sound of heavy shoes or the rustle of a silk coat that arrested Ilara's breath. It was the soft, confident smirk on the face of the young woman standing beside her husband, a woman whose luxurious, expensive coat did little to hide the undeniable, pronounced curve of her abdomen. Ilara felt the tremor start deep in her chest, but she didn't scream. She only tightened her lips and offered a razor-thin, cold smile, the same smile she offered when she saw the headline scrolling across the television screen in the distance, a headline that spoke of corruption, ruin, and a fate far more terrifying than the one her husband intended for her. On this particular Christmas day, the residence was a haven of seasonal splendor. Warm lights glowed from every corner, casting an inviting amber hue across the polished hardwood. The aroma of a freshly roasted turkey mingled deliciously with hints of spiced cider, flooding the air and promising comfort. Ilara Vance had spent the entire morning and afternoon ensuring every detail was flawless for her husband, Garrett Thorne. As she adjusted the final red bow on a napkin, she wished for a semblance of peace, a respite from the underlying tension that had plagued their marriage. The sharp ring of the doorbell pulled her from her thoughts. Hurrying to answer, Ilara managed a smile intended to conceal her deep-seated exhaustion. But the smile vanished the moment the door opened. Garrett stood there, broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed, but he was not alone. Standing next to him was Serafina Moss, youthful, clad in an expensive, fashionable coat, and bearing a stomach that was unmistakably rounded. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Ilara managed, her voice trembling but thick with shock and disbelief. Garrett didn't acknowledge her. He simply pushed the door further open, entering their home as if she were an inconvenient obstacle. Serafina trailed behind him, wearing a look of cold, satisfied condescension. "It means that it is high time you faced the hard reality," Garrett announced, his voice frustratingly calm, as he removed his coat as if arriving at a festive gathering intended solely for him. Ilara followed them into the elaborate living room, feeling a knot of paralyzing tension coil tightly in every muscle. "The reality," she insisted, fighting desperately to maintain her composure. Her vision fixed on Serafina, who was drawing attention to her belly with a deliberate, theatrical gesture. "Ilara, this is Serafina," Garrett declared, with the casual air one might use to introduce a distant acquaintance. "And she is expecting my heir. Something that you, Ilara, were never capable of providing me. Something you could not give me after all these years." The cruelty of the words struck Ilara like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She refused, however, to let herself collapse, not in front of them. "Your child," she repeated, the words serving more as a shield to buy time than a genuine inquiry. Her mind struggled to comprehend the audacious, brutal display unfolding in her living room. Garrett, displaying an arrogance that seemed to physically inflate him, dropped onto the luxurious sofa. "Does this truly shock you? After all the years we have wasted, it was only logical that I would seek out what you could never offer. Serafina is complete, successful. You, on the other hand, Ilara, are merely a shell. You are like a vacant property, beautiful, well-maintained on the outside, but utterly empty within, with nothing worthwhile to offer inside." The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy with contempt. Ilara consciously hid her shaking hands behind her back. She would not grant them the satisfaction of seeing how profoundly his words had wounded her. "And you chose this specific day, Christmas, to parade your infidelity and celebrate it?" she finally asked, surprised that her voice sounded far steadier than she felt. Serafina, who had been quietly enjoying the spectacle, chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Garrett insisted that I join him. He wants us all to begin learning to coexist. After all, you don't really have another place to go, do you?" Ilara turned back to Garrett, incredulous. "Coexist? What insane notion are you proposing?" Garrett rose slowly, approaching her with that familiar, condescending look that had always made her feel small and inadequate. "Do not play the martyr, Ilara. I have borne the incredible burden of your emptiness for years. It is not my failing if you cannot fulfill a requirement as fundamental as bearing me a child. Stop being such an exhausting burden." Tears stung her eyes, threatening to spill over, but Ilara held them back with every fiber of her being. She would absolutely not allow this despicable man to see the full extent of the destruction he was wreaking. "You are truly vile," she whispered, her words sharp and fragile, like fragments of broken glass. Garrett laughed, a dry, brief sound devoid of humor. "Vile or not, Ilara, this is the inescapable reality. If you have any desire to remain a part of this comfortable house, you will be forced to accept the situation exactly as it stands." Ilara felt her heart splinter into countless sharp pieces. She desperately wanted to unleash a scream, to weep until she was blind, or simply to flee. But a strange, stubborn resistance held her rooted to the spot. It was in that harrowing moment that an unexpected, abrupt sound pierced the tension. The television, which had been left playing in the corner, suddenly switched its volume and began broadcasting a breaking news report. Garrett, who seconds earlier had appeared completely invulnerable, turned instantly, his face draining of all color, becoming ghostly pale. His attention was violently snapped to the screen. Ilara looked too, though her vision was still blurred by unshed tears. "It is utterly impossible," Garrett muttered, stumbling toward the television, his eyes frantically fixed on the images and text. Serafina moved nervously to his side, fear replacing her smugness. "What is it, Garrett? What is happening?" Ilara observed them, watching the swift, sickening collapse of Garrett's usual overweening arrogance. Whatever he was seeing on the screen had shaken him to his very core. Despite her confusion, a small, cold flicker of curiosity ignited within her. Whatever this news was, it had instantly reduced him to the weak, fragile man he always masked. Without uttering another word, Garrett lunged and shut off the television set. "We must go now," he commanded, completely ignoring Ilara as if she were furniture. "But what?" Serafina tried to protest, but Garrett was already grabbing his outer coat. Ilara remained motionless, watching as her husband and his paramour rushed toward the exit. Just before stepping through the door, Garrett turned back, his gaze dark and full of menace. "Understand this. This is not finished." The heavy door slammed shut behind them, leaving the house flooded with a terrifying silence. Ilara finally allowed the stored-up tears to flow, but the sobbing did not last long. A fresh, hot spark of determination began to burn fiercely inside her. That terrible night, amidst the wreckage of her destroyed Christmas, she made a silent, profound vow. She would never, under any circumstances, be humiliated or belittled like this again. The following morning, cold air drifted through the forgotten open windows. The house, which had glowed with warm, festive lights only hours before, now felt desolate, hollowed out, as if Garrett's terrible betrayal had physically drained every trace of joy from the premises. Ilara remained slumped on the sofa, utterly immobilized, her eyes swollen and raw from the tears she had finally stopped trying to wipe away. Suddenly, a dull, shocking thud startled her out of her stupor. The antique wall clock had inexplicably slipped from its mounting and crashed onto the floor, shattering into countless pieces. Ilara stared at the broken mechanism, unable to shake the symbolism. Her life, like the clock, lay in fragments. A vibrating sound from her phone drew her attention. It was a text message. "I truly hope you are reconsidering your position, because I certainly do not have time for your exhausting drama," Garrett had written, his signature arrogance palpable even through the text. Ilara clenched her jaw. How dare he continue to treat her with such callousness after what he had done? She wanted to draft a scathing reply, to tell him every painful thought in her mind, but her finger froze above the send button. He simply did not deserve another word from her. The next incoming message was far worse. A photograph popped up on her screen. It was Serafina, brazenly sprawled across the center of the master bed that Ilara had shared with Garrett. The image bore a caption designed to wound, Your time occupying this house is officially over. It is mine now." In that instant, something fundamental and protective snapped inside Elara. Her legs trembled as she rose to her feet, the phone still clutched tightly in her hand. She took one step toward the bedroom door, but her body could absorb no more trauma. A sharp, searing pain shot through her chest. Elara collapsed violently to the floor, watching the world around her grow darker and receding with every passing second. The long, mournful wail of the ambulance siren sliced through the night's stillness. Elara was only vaguely aware of the movements as paramedics carefully loaded her onto a stretcher. Her neighbor, alarmed by the sound of her collapse, had called emergency services. "Does this woman have any immediate family we should notify?" one of the paramedics asked, concern etched onto his face. Elara tried desperately to speak, to communicate that there was no one. Her husband was entirely preoccupied with his new life, and her mother lived too far away, but the words refused to form in her throat. She closed her eyes and let the protective darkness envelop her. When she next awoke, the bright, relentless white lights of the hospital room blinded her. A nurse was methodically checking her vitals. "You experienced a severe anxiety attack," the nurse explained gently, noticing Elara was lucid. "Your body simply could not handle all that immense stress you were under. Your body just couldn't handle all that stress." The phrase echoed painfully in her mind, a direct consequence of Garrett's actions. Hours later, discharged from the hospital, Elara walked out into the biting morning air, completely directionless. Her house was no longer a safe haven. It was a scene of violation. She couldn't face the thought of seeing Garrett and Serafina again. She walked aimlessly along the deserted streets, the cold penetrating her skin, until her instinct guided her to a bus stop. She boarded a vehicle heading toward the distant town where her mother lived. She arrived at the door of the small, simple house in Willow Creek, Virginia, just as the sun began to timidly rise. She knocked with frantic desperation, seeking only refuge. Mara Vance, her mother, opened the door quickly. Seeing her daughter's ravaged state, she immediately pulled her into a wordless, fierce embrace. "My child, what horrors did they commit against you?" Mara asked, her voice heavy with immediate pain and fury. Elara tried to speak, but fresh tears immediately interrupted her. Everything poured out in a torrent. The humiliation, Garrett's sickeningly cruel words, Serafina's triumphant presence, and her collapse that resulted in a hospital stay. Mara listened patiently, stroking Elara's hair just as she had when Elara was a small, troubled girl. "That man is utterly worthless," Mara finally stated, her tone firm and unwavering. "But you, my daughter, you are not the empty vessel he claims you are. He has discarded someone precious, someone valuable, and I promise you this. He will regret it deeply." "I feel worthless, Mama," Elara murmured, burying her face into her mother's shoulder. Mara took Elara's face gently in her hands, forcing her to look up. "Never utter that lie again. Never. He tried to force that belief on you, but you must reject it now. This is not the end, Elara. This is your definitive chance to show him, and the world, that you are magnificent and that you never needed him." Elara didn't reply immediately, but something in her mother's fierce certainty ignited a small, persistent spark within her soul. She knew the path to recovery would be arduous, but in that moment, she made the vow that she would not allow Garrett to destroy her future. The day progressed quietly at Mara's house, filled with comforting conversation and long, necessary silences. In the afternoon, Elara walked through the quiet town, seeking solitude and clarity. It was then that she saw a faded, hand-painted sign that immediately caught her attention. Auditions for the Willow Creek Community Theater Group. Discover your passion on stage. A ghost of a smile touched Elara's lips. She had been a passionate actress in her younger days, before she married Garrett and gave up her dreams to dedicate her life entirely to his ambition. The theater belonged to a seemingly distant past, but the sight of the sign was an unexpected invitation to try again. Could she truly find a lost piece of herself in that small, familiar place? The question lingered, and for the first time since that terrible Christmas night, Ilara felt a nascent flicker of hope, a belief that there might, just might, be a viable way out of the darkness Garrett had left her in. Back at the house, she received a familiar, loathsome message from Garrett. "I sincerely hope you've spent this time reflecting on your behavior. I expect no trouble when you return. Serafina is permanent now, and you have only two choices: accept her presence or disappear forever." Ilara looked at the message, and for the very first time, she did not feel the crushing weight of his domination. He had exposed the worst, most vile parts of himself, and she was now firmly determined to reveal the best of herself. A small smile, charged with a potent mix of defiance and hope, spread across her face. Ilara woke early the next morning, fueled by a feeling she barely recognized: unadulterated defiance. Garrett's cruel words still echoed, but they no longer bore their crushing weight. Now they were mere fuel, a harsh, constant reminder of everything he assumed she could never achieve. She walked toward the local theater, a mix of determination and anxiety coursing through her. She was ready to face the challenge that would definitively alter the course of her ruined life. The theater was humble, with scuffed walls and a faded half-hung sign, but it possessed a welcoming, almost sacred air that calmed her nerves. On the stage, a small group of people were intensely rehearsing a complex scene. In the center of the room stood a tall man with a fiercely intense gaze. This was Rian Kendall, the group's demanding director. "Are you looking for something specific?" Rian asked, his tone sharp and direct, as if he begrudged the time taken from the actors. Ilara cleared her throat and stepped forward. "I saw the notice for auditions. I would like to participate." Rian raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And what exactly do you believe you have to offer us?" "A profound passion I abandoned a very long time ago," Ilara replied, her voice steadying. "I want desperately to reclaim it." Rian let out a short, clearly unconvinced laugh. "They all claim that. Get up on the stage. Let us see what you can truly deliver." Ilara's first audition was a humiliating disaster. Her voice was thin and shaky, her movements clumsy, and worse, she forgot several critical lines of dialogue. The other actors exchanged audible murmurs, and Rian sighed loudly, openly frustrated. "This, madam, is not a simple parlor game," Rian stated, crossing his arms rigidly. "If you are here expecting applause just for making an effort, you are profoundly mistaken and in the wrong location." Ilara clenched her fists, feeling the humiliation burn, but she refused to retreat. Instead of backing away, she took a definitive step forward. "Grant me one additional chance," she pleaded. Rian shook his head, momentarily surprised by her stubborn insistence. "I do not typically make exceptions for second chances." "Then please make one now," she insisted, her voice surprisingly firm, despite the storm of anxiety she felt. The laughs of a few actors in the background stung her, but she held her ground. Rian studied her for a long, quiet moment before finally gesturing toward the stage. 5 minutes. That is all you get." Ilara's second attempt was far from perfect, but it contained enough raw emotion for Rian to recognize something vital beneath the years of neglect, a spark of buried potential, hidden beneath the self-doubt and the residue of humiliation. When she finished, Rian nodded slowly. "Very well, you may stay. But let this be clear. Prepare to work twice as hard as every other person here. This is not charity, Ilara." Ilara nodded, a powerful mix of intense relief and excitement flooding her entire being. For the first time in years, she felt she was reclaiming a precious, tangible piece of herself. The ensuing weeks were sheer, unadulterated hell disguised as intensive rehearsals. Rian had zero patience for errors and did not hesitate to loudly point out Ilara's every flaw with harsh, cutting words. "Is that truly the absolute best performance you can muster?" he bellowed one day when she stumbled over a line during a full run-through. The laughter of the other actors echoed brutally in the vast space, but Ilara bit her tongue, pushing through the pain. Every night, she returned to her mother's home utterly exhausted, her body aching, her mind plagued by doubt. Yet, when she looked in the mirror, she noticed a change, a latent strength that hadn't existed before. One night, while she was practicing a difficult monologue in front of a full-length mirror, a message arrived from Garrett. "I hope you have finally understood that, without my influence, you are absolutely nothing." Ilara squeezed the phone tightly, but she offered no response. Instead, she began reciting her monologue with greater passion and intensity than ever before, vividly imagining Garrett's arrogant face directly in front of her. In that moment of fury and creation, she realized she wasn't simply acting, she was actively fighting for her future. When opening night finally arrived, Ilara was utterly prepared. She had spent months relentlessly perfecting every movement, every single line. She knew this night was her monumental chance, not merely to shine professionally, but to prove to Garrett, and more importantly to herself, that she was infinitely more complex and formidable than he had ever tried to make her believe. The small community theater was packed to capacity that evening. Ilara took a deep, steadying breath behind the curtain, feeling the intense weight of anticipation pressing down on every fiber of her being. Just before she was due to make her entrance, she saw something that stopped her heart. Garrett was sitting conspicuously in the audience, his expression a contemptuous blend of mockery and curiosity. "Are you ready to proceed?" Rian asked, immediately noticing the sudden tension in her posture. Ilara simply nodded. She absolutely would not permit Garrett to steal this sacred moment from her. When the powerful stage lights came up and the scene sprung to life, Ilara underwent a stunning transformation. Every word she delivered resonated clearly throughout the theater. Every controlled movement captivated the audience's complete attention. Her performance was a breathtaking fusion of profound vulnerability and unexpected strength that left the entire audience speechless. Garrett watched her, his eyes wide and vacant, unable to process what was unfolding before him. This was not the broken, ruined woman he had casually abandoned. This was a strong, powerful force of a woman who, even from the stage, made him feel small and irrelevant in his expensive seat. When the final curtain dropped, the theater erupted in deafening, sustained applause. Ilara stood center stage, looking out at the cheering audience, her head held high and defiant. In that singular moment, her eyes locked onto Garrett's. Without uttering a single word, she gave him a small, precise smile, a smile that communicated not gratitude, but a declaration. "Observe the magnitude of what I have become without you." That night, as she walked the familiar, cool streets back to her mother's house, Ilara felt something deeply unfamiliar. Profound pride. She had faced her deepest fears, endured the humiliation, and undeniably proven that she was far more resilient than Garrett or anyone else had ever imagined. And she knew this was just the beginning of her ascent. Hours later, Garrett paced relentlessly in the living room of the house he once shared with Ilara. The echoing memory of the triumphant contempt in her eyes from the stage still bounced painfully in his head. He had never witnessed her like that, so utterly self-assured, so capable of looking at him as if he were nothing. That look had burned him, but now he faced problems far more pressing than his wounded male ego. The television was on, and a local news anchor was discussing the latest developments in the federal investigation into a widespread corruption scheme involving several high-profile businessmen. Garrett violently slammed the screen off with a groan. He needed no further reminders. The looming shadow of his terrible decisions was finally catching up to him, and he had nowhere left to run. A sharp sound at the front door interrupted his distressed thoughts. It was Ilara. He looked at her, genuinely shocked. She had never once returned since that night. "What exactly are you doing back here?" Garrett demanded, struggling to hide his immediate discomfort and fear. Ilara did not answer right away. She walked into the house with firm, deliberate steps, closing the door purposefully behind her. Her cold, steady gaze made Garrett feel small and exposed. "I returned because I need you to listen to every single word I am about to say," she told him, dropping her purse onto a nearby table with a loud, dry thud. "I refuse to allow you to think you can continue to play childish games with me." Garrett attempted to resurrect his usual tone of cold arrogance. "Oh yes. And what exactly am I supposed to hear, Ilara? Ilara looked him directly in the eye. Her tone was firm, infused with a contained fury that utterly disarmed him. I dedicated years of my life inside this house with you. I sacrificed my dreams. I gave up my career because you constantly insisted that we were an inseparable team. And when things did not align with your specific expectations, because I couldn't bear children, you made the conscious choice to bring another woman into my sanctuary. And not only that, you possessed the staggering nerve to demand that I stay and share this intimate space with her, as if my existence meant nothing at all to you. Garrett attempted to interrupt, but Ilara sharply raised a hand. Silence. Do not dare speak. You deliberately treated me like absolute garbage. You humiliated me publicly. You called me empty and worthless. And you genuinely expected me to simply accept it without objection. But I am here to tell you something critical, Garrett. I respect myself now. Because if I do not, I have learned that no one else, especially not you, will do it for me. Garrett gritted his teeth, but he felt utterly cornered by the undeniable weight of Ilara's accusations. You, Garrett, possess not 1 ounce of genuine dignity, Ilara continued, her voice scathing. You are a man so fundamentally weak that instead of facing your own inevitable failures, you chose to hide behind another woman and her womb. And look at you now, utterly ruined, burdened by every single consequence you brought upon yourself. Because, Garrett, there is always a price to be paid for doing wrong. The mention of his overwhelming financial and legal troubles made Garrett instinctively defensive. What possible insight do you have into my intricate problems? He spat, attempting to regain some desperate semblance of control. Ilara let out a bitter, cutting laugh. I know far more than enough. I know that the corruption scandal the news is discussing has you trapped up to your neck. I know that those shady, underhanded deals you indulged in, all to feed your fragile sense of power, are now dragging you straight down. I know that Serafina fled the moment she realized she couldn't handle the pressure and the disgrace. And do you know the beautiful irony, Garrett? I am truly glad because everything you are currently suffering, you earned it yourself. Garrett pounded the massive mahogany table with his fist. I don't owe you anything. Everything I pursued was to maintain this luxurious house, to give us a supposedly better life. If the plans went awry, it is certainly not my fault. Ilara crossed her arms, maintaining her rigid posture. Are you still capable of lying to yourself, Garrett? You did absolutely nothing for us. Everything you undertook was solely to inflate your pathetic ego, to feel bigger than you truly are. But look at where your ego has landed you now. You have lost everything that ever mattered. Garrett slumped into a chair, finally defeated. For the first time in memory, he had no caustic words left to defend his actions. Ilara looked at him with a complex mixture of pity and deep contempt. I will tell you one last thing, Garrett. I could have readily helped you. I could have supported you, as I faithfully did for years. But you went out of your way to teach me that my support, my entire being, meant nothing to you. So now you mean nothing to me either. Garrett lifted his head, his eyes burning with renewed anger. You only came back here to humiliate me further, to elevate your own feelings of self-worth. Ilara shook her head slowly. No. I came to make it crystal clear that I will not permit you to continue thinking you possess any control over me. I came to make you understand this profound truth. You are absolutely no longer a part of my life. You hold zero power over me anymore. With those final definitive words, Ilara picked up her purse and walked resolutely toward the door. Before stepping out, she turned one last time. I truly hope you manage to find a way to resolve your terrible problems, Garrett. But this time, you will navigate that path entirely alone. And with that, she left him sitting isolated in the living room, surrounded by a profound silence and the heavy shadows of his own calamitous, ruinous decisions. Weeks turned into months, and Ilara watched her life transform into something dazzling and unbelievable. Looking at her reflection in the plush dressing room mirror, her face radiated determination, burgeoning confidence, and something far rarer, a happiness she had completely forgotten could exist. She had just completed a televised interview for a major national program discussing her shocking meteoric rise in the theater world since her powerful debut in the small Willow Creek venue. The media could not stop talking about her. Every play she graced was an immediate, stunning success, and her name began to echo in the most prestigious artistic circles in Viridia. Headlines constantly celebrated her, the actress who abandoned her past to truly shine. Ilara Vance. Talent born from the ashes. Even entertainment news shows started discreetly inquiring about her private life, mentioning her estranged ex-husband Garrett with highly speculative tones. As she gathered her belongings, her phone vibrated sharply on the table. It was a message from Garrett. "Ilara, I urgently need to speak with you. It is crucial. Please, I beg your forgiveness. I made terrible mistakes, but I am paying the ultimate price for them now." Ilara let out a deep, weary sigh. This was not the first time Garrett had attempted to contact her in recent weeks. His desperate messages had become increasingly insistent, even frantic. Ilara knew his entire life was crumbling, but she felt absolutely no moral obligation to lift a finger to assist him. She closed her purse and walked out of the dressing room, leaving his desperate plea unanswered. The Grand Viridia Downtown Theater where she was performing that night was completely packed. The audience's applause at the conclusion of the show was utterly deafening. Ilara walked off stage and amidst the crowd of admirers waiting to greet her, she spotted an unexpected, unwelcome figure. Garrett. He approached her with nervous, shuffling steps, his eyes red and swollen from recent crying. "Ilara, I truly need to speak with you. Please," he choked out. Ilara crossed her arms, maintaining a posture of unyielding firmness. "What do you want, Garrett? I need you to listen to me, just for a brief moment. I am begging you," he insisted. The desperate intensity of his voice, combined with the fact that he was making this display in a public space, forced her unwilling consent. They moved quickly to a secluded corner of the theater where their conversation would not be overheard. Garrett immediately started talking, his words a jumbled, panicked mess. "I have completely ruined everything. The business deals spun wildly out of my control. The authorities are actively pursuing me. I am likely facing years in jail. I have lost everything, Ilara. Have no one left. I desperately require your assistance." Ilara looked at him, feeling a chilly mixture of pity and quiet satisfaction. This shambling wreck was the man who had violently humiliated her, who had gleefully trampled her dignity without a second thought. Now he stood before her, actively begging, as if she were his last possible salvation. "And why, precisely, should I lift a finger to help you now?" she asked, her calmness a shocking contrast to his frantic desperation. "Because I know that deep down you still possess a fundamentally good heart. We are all flawed, Ilara, we all make terrible mistakes. I was a fool, a complete jerk. I failed entirely to value the magnificent thing I had. I failed you, and I regret it with every fiber of my being. But this immediate situation is truly serious. If you do not help me, I have no idea what terrible fate awaits me." Ilara watched him closely. The raw, miserable tears in his eyes were real, but so was the ingrained selfishness that motivated every action. He wasn't here because he loved her or because his regret was genuine. He was here purely because he was utterly cornered, had hit absolute rock bottom, and had eliminated everyone else in his life. "Do you know what the cruelest irony of this entire situation is, Garrett?" she finally said, breaking the heavy silence. "When we were married, you constantly worked to make me feel like I was the root of every problem, that I was the one who held no intrinsic worth. But look clearly at where we stand today. I am here, living the absolute best moment of my life, and you, Garrett, are utterly ruined. And all of it, every bit of it, is a result of your own wicked decisions." Garrett gripped his head with his hands, desperate and defeated. I know I messed up. But everyone deserves a second chance at redemption. I am actively asking for your forgiveness, Ilara. Please, if what we ever shared meant anything at all, help me now." She let out a dry, bitter laugh. "A second chance. Like the second chance you generously offered me when you dragged that woman directly into our home. Like the second chance you gave me when you coldly called me empty. No, Garrett. This defining moment is not about charity or second chances. This moment is entirely about you taking complete responsibility for the wreckage of your actions. Garrett collapsed violently to his knees in front of her, completely disregarding the curious people passing by. He was a broken, destroyed man. But Ilara felt absolutely no compassion. She had climbed to this incredible height despite everything he had done to break her, and she had no intention of turning back or allowing him to pull her down. Please, Ilara, I only want to extricate myself from this overwhelming mess. I cannot go to prison, he pleaded. Ilara looked down at him, seeing him, perhaps, for the first time without the distorting lens of love or resentment. I cannot save you, Garrett. I don't even know if I truly want to, because if you face the facts, this is precisely what you deserve. Garrett looked up at her, his face a mask of raw anguish, but Ilara remained firm, unmoving. I hope truly that you learn something valuable from this devastating experience. But whatever lesson you find, you will learn it without me. I am not, and I never was, your appointed savior, Garrett. With those final, conclusive words, she turned her back and left him there, kneeling helplessly on the floor, surrounded by the clamor of a theater celebrating her overwhelming success. That night, as Ilara gazed out at the dazzling, sprawling lights of Viridia from the window of her luxurious hotel suite, she felt a profound, unprecedented peace. She had faced the man who had nearly obliterated her existence, and had emerged completely victorious. Her life was definitively her own, and nothing and no one would ever be permitted to take that fundamental truth away from her again. Her career only continued its breathtaking upward trajectory. She was showered with opportunities: a role in an international feature film, an invitation to star in a new play on a famous Broadway stage, and lucrative endorsement deals that cemented her status as a powerful public figure. On a television set during a prime-time interview, a host spoke warmly to her. Ilara, your ascent has been incredible. Everyone is talking about your transformation. How did you achieve this? Ilara smiled. It is a deliberate combination of grueling hard work, fierce faith, and surrounding myself with people who genuinely believe in my potential. I certainly endured very difficult times, but I believe those experiences ultimately made me profoundly stronger. I learned the crucial necessity of never surrendering, and now, here I am. Later, controversy struck when a major news outlet published a detailed article explicitly linking Garrett to the corruption investigation. The article detailed how he had manipulated contracts, bribed numerous officials, and illegally diverted funds to maintain his ostentatious lifestyle. It noted that all his former partners had abandoned him, leaving Garrett to face the grave consequences in total isolation. Ilara closed the magazine and set it aside. She could not deny a flicker of satisfaction, knowing that life had finally delivered justice. Yet, she understood she could not afford to remain trapped in the resentment of the past. Garrett was no longer a factor in her story. Her success depended solely on her own determination and continuous hard work. Weeks later, Ilara was in her dressing room at a massive, vibrant theater. Outside, thousands of people eagerly awaited her performance on what would be one of the most career-defining nights of her life. The same woman who had been humiliated, underestimated, and abandoned was now an admired, rising star. As she looked into the mirror, her phone vibrated. The message was from an unfamiliar number. Reading it, her heart seized for a split second. It was Serafina. Ilara, I have to talk to you immediately. I truly don't know who else I can turn to. Please. It concerns my daughter. Surprise flooded her, quickly followed by cautious curiosity. Ilara knew that Serafina and Garrett were both facing severe corruption charges. The news had been full of details regarding their arrests and ongoing trial. Ilara took a deep breath and replied, agreeing to meet the next day. In a stark, cold prison visiting room, Ilara saw Serafina for the first time in months. Her physical appearance was drastically changed. The arrogant, self-assured woman was now haggard, her gaze reflecting profound despair. Cradled gently in her arms was a baby, Lyra, barely a few months old. "Thank you profoundly for coming, Ilara," Seraphina said, her voice thin and broken. Ilara took the seat opposite her, observing the woman with a complicated mix of caution and unexpected compassion. "What exactly do you require?" Ilara asked directly. Seraphina looked down at the infant, stroking her tiny face with deep tenderness. "This is Lyra, my daughter, and Garrett's daughter. I do not know how much longer I will remain here. My legal team warns I will likely spend years in a cell. I cannot bear the thought of my daughter growing up without a mother's presence. She is innocent. She is not to blame for any of this horror." A sudden knot tightened in Ilara's stomach. The infant was entirely innocent, and her small, pure face radiated a purity that deeply moved Ilara. "Why are you telling me this, Seraphina?" Ilara asked, striving to keep her voice steady. Seraphina looked up, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. "Because you are the sole person I have ever known who possesses a truly good heart. You understand deep pain, but you also possess the formidable strength to rebound and succeed. I need you to raise Lyra. I know Garrett is completely incapable, and I won't be able to either. Please, Ilara, I beg you, do this for her future." The request left Ilara utterly speechless. She had never imagined a situation like this. Her mind raced with doubts and questions, but something deep inside her told her she could not, morally, ignore the fate of this child. "Are you completely certain about this immense decision?" she finally asked. Seraphina nodded, her tears still flowing. "Yes. It is the only acceptable option for her well-being. Please, Ilara. I have absolutely no one else." Ilara agreed to take Lyra in. It was a decision she knew would redefine her existence, but she immediately hired a trusted, dedicated nanny to ensure the baby was meticulously cared for while she maintained her intensely demanding schedule. With each passing day, Ilara grew exponentially fonder of Lyra. The little girl had arrived unexpectedly, but with every spontaneous laugh and smile, Ilara felt her heart filling with a deep, consuming love she had never anticipated. Meanwhile, her relationship with Rian Kendall blossomed naturally. They had spent months learning about each other, supporting each other's careers. He admired Ilara's remarkable sensitivity, and she viewed him as a constant, reliable source of inspiration. One evening, after a particularly successful show, Rian invited her to an intimate dinner. In the middle of their conversation, Ilara realized she had to be completely honest. "Rian, there is something I must tell you," she began tentatively. "A few weeks ago, I adopted Lyra, the daughter of Garrett and Seraphina. I know how complex that sounds, but I simply could not leave her alone and untended." Rian immediately reached across the table and took her hand, looking at her with genuine, tender admiration. "That, Ilara, only confirms what I have known about you all along. You are an extraordinary woman with an immeasurably huge heart. Lyra is incredibly fortunate to have you as her mother." Ilara felt her eyes well up with grateful tears. She had feared Rian would distance himself, but instead, his profound understanding drew them closer than ever. Over time, Lyra became the irreplaceable, central focus of Ilara's life. With the help of her attentive nanny, she brought Lyra to all her rehearsals and shows. The public quickly took notice of the infant and adored her almost as much as they adored her adoptive mother. Lyra was a constant, living reminder that even in the most catastrophic circumstances, beautiful, life-affirming things could still emerge. One night, while Ilara was home with Lyra, Rian arrived with a wide, earnest smile. "I have something important I need to share with you," he said, sitting down next to her. "What is it, Rian?" Ilara asked, curiosity sparking. "I want us to continue building what we have started, but at our own careful pace. When you are absolutely ready, when we both feel completely sure, I would like to build a true home, a life, with you and with Lyra." Ilara looked at him, feeling her heart swell and pound with overwhelming joy. "I want that more than anything, Rian. But I want us to build it correctly, only when we are both truly ready." They embraced tightly, with Lyra playing contentedly near them. Ilara couldn't help but look upward, overwhelmed by gratitude. Thank you, God, for every good thing you have given me. After the relentless storm, the peaceful calm has finally arrived. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities, and Ilara was ready to face them all with an open heart, strength, and unwavering hope. Ilara's backyard was exuberantly decorated with colorful streamers and vibrant balloons that fluttered merrily in the afternoon breeze. Tables were laden with sweet pastries, elaborate cakes, and a magnificent centerpiece cake bearing Lyra's name scripted in gold. It was a special, jubilant day. Lyra was celebrating her first birthday, and Ilara wanted to celebrate it with every ounce of love her little daughter deserved. Children laughed and ran across the lawn, playing games, while the adults chatted animatedly. Lyra, dressed in a delicate little pink dress covered in flowers, sat in her high chair, observing the cheerful spectacle with bright curiosity. Ilara approached her with a loving smile, adjusting the ribbon in Lyra's soft hair. "Happy birthday, my little princess," she whispered, kissing her gently on the forehead. Rian appeared behind her, carrying a large, brightly wrapped box. "Ready to unveil your biggest birthday surprise?" he asked, looking at both Ilara and Lyra with shared excitement. Ilara nodded, carefully lifting Lyra out of her chair so she could see the present up close. "I wonder what wonderful thing it could be," Ilara said playfully, as Rian placed the enormous box in front of them. With a little coordinated help, Lyra tugged at the ribbon, and the box slowly unfolded. A small, energetic puppy, with huge floppy ears and bright, intelligent eyes, came bounding out, barking enthusiastically and happily. "It's a puppy dog," one of the children exclaimed loudly, and the others screamed with pure delight. Lyra let out a lovely, high-pitched giggle, instantly reaching out her small hands toward the excited puppy. Ilara laughed, picking up the soft animal as its tail wagged furiously. "He is absolutely perfect," she declared, stroking the puppy gently. "What name should we choose for him?" Rian smiled, kneeling beside them. "I was contemplating Zephyr," he suggested. "He seems quite swift and playful, doesn't he?" Ilara looked down at the puppy, which chose that moment to lick Lyra's cheek, causing the little girl to dissolve into even deeper giggles. "Yes, Zephyr is perfect. It suits him perfectly." Lyra clapped her tiny hands, as if fully understanding the naming ceremony, and Ilara felt her heart swell, completely, beautifully full. Rian stood and took Ilara's hand. "I truly cannot believe an entire year has passed since Lyra completely changed your life," he said, looking at her tenderly. "You have been an incredible, fierce mother." "She is incredibly lucky to have you in her life as well," Ilara replied, gently squeezing his hand. "We are a powerful team, aren't we, Rian?" Rian nodded, smiling warmly, as Lyra continued her joyful exploration with Zephyr on the lawn. The party carried on, filled with laughter, games, and music. As the sun began its slow descent, the backyard was bathed in the soft, intimate glow of string lights. Ilara gathered the remaining guests in the center of the lawn, where a wicker basket overflowed with colorful, buoyant balloons. "I want us to perform one final special action to conclude this beautiful day," she said, holding one of the balloons herself. "These balloons are a collective symbol of our deepest good wishes for Lyra. Each of us will fill them with our hopes and our dreams for her long life." Everyone present took a balloon, including Rian, who carefully helped Lyra clutch hers. Ilara watched them all, feeling that she could not possibly ask for anything more meaningful in life. "Are you all ready?" she asked, looking at the expectant faces of her friends and family. "Ready!" Everyone responded in heartfelt unison. Ilara, Rian, and Lyra simultaneously released their balloons, watching them soar high into the twilight sky, carrying with them wishes of love, happiness, and unwavering hope. Zephyr ran excitedly through the yard, barking happily as he chased the rapidly receding balloons. Rian hugged Ilara and Lyra close, and the three of them stood there together, watching the final colors disappear. The profound, palpable love surrounding them was undeniable, and the sound of Zephyr playing completed the scene of perfect, hard-won happiness. Thank you, God, for this perfect day, and for everything good you have granted us, Ilara murmured softly as Rian held her tighter. It was a perfect, indelible moment, saturated with love, endless laughter, and the firm promise of a brilliant shared future.